Hey everybody, welcome back to the Consumer Warrior Podcast. The podcast is dedicated to helping you with your big debt problems. If you're just dabbling in debt, this isn't the podcast for you. We deal with the big debt problems like repossession, debt collection lawsuits, foreclosure, bankruptcy, and all the other horrible financial problems that are out there. We're here to help you to help yourself. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, John Skiba. And on today's episode, I wanted to talk about a question that I get all the time as it relates to bankruptcy. And one of the questions people generally ask when I meet with them in a consultation is, do I have enough debt to file for bankruptcy? But before I answer that question, I want to talk about today's show. It's sponsored by the Consumer Warrior Project. This is the platform that I've put together that provides forms and templates and video tutorials and information to people who are looking to help themselves as they navigate the legal problems that are associated with their debt problems. You can learn more about that by going to the website legal.coach. That's the actual website, legal.coach. Put that in any web browser, and you can find more about some of the free resources and some of the paid video tutorials that I have that can help you as you go through the legal process. Okay, the question for today's episode is, do I have enough debt to file for bankruptcy? And something that people are often surprised to learn is that there is no set amount of debt that you have to file for bankruptcy. A lot of it's depending upon your specific situation, and surprisingly, you could even file for bankruptcy if you had no debt. I don't know why you would do that, but you could file for bankruptcy with no debt because there is no specific requirement as to the dollar amount that has to be owed. Now, when I look at people's situation in consultations, I generally look through it. There's really two things that I look at. The first one is fairly straightforward, and that is there a crisis situation as far as, are you about to lose something? Is your house going to be foreclosed on? Is your car going to be repossessed? Are your wages being garnished? And in situations like that, bankruptcy can help not only so much that you're getting rid of the debt, but more importantly, that when you file a bankruptcy case, the court puts an order in place that stops all collections. This order is called the automatic stay, and it happens automatically. And as soon as you file the case, the court issues that. It stops whatever action the creditors are trying to take. So it stops the repossession of your vehicle. It'll stop the foreclosure of your home. It stops wage garnishment. It even stops even more minor things like debt collection phone calls or letters. Everything has to stop to give you a chance to either reorganize under a Chapter 13 or to get rid of the unsecured debts in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So if you're dealing with a crisis type situation, this is one of those things where the bankruptcy makes a lot of sense just because it has a lot of power to stop the actions of creditors. Now, the other one is a little bit more just having to deal with what types of debt you have and the amount of debt you have. And I call this my 5-year rule. And what I have clients do is to look at their debt and determine, can they pay off their debt, or at least a good portion of their debt, within a 5-year period from where they are now. Now, one way to do this is to look at the total amount of debt that you have, and particularly if it's credit card debt, you can look on the monthly statements that they're providing you, and they actually are required to disclose to you if you just pay the monthly minimums on those particular debts. It'll show you how long it'll take to pay it off, and it's actually pretty frightening when you look at that. And something that seems like a relatively typical credit card could take you 10 years or 15 years or 30 years or the rest of your life kind of thing to pay off. And so I have you look at the total amount of debt, look at things like those truth in lending statements or the disclosure statements that are on the monthly statements as far as how long it's going to take you to actually repay all of your creditors. And if it's something that you can do within a 5-year period, then maybe bankruptcy is not the best option. There may be other reasons that it is, but that's one of the things I look at first is, what can you do in 5 years? And the reason why I choose 5 years is because if you're in bankruptcy, and particularly a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, they're going to require you to pay as much as you can to your creditors over a 5-year period. Well, if you can do that outside of bankruptcy and essentially settle the accounts or get rid of the claims in their entirety, then maybe bankruptcy is not necessary, and you can do something more along the lines of, like I've talked about before, the Dave Ramsey, the debt snowball. Take one of those other types of programs and implement that to get rid of the debt problem. I also, in implementing this 5-year rule, tell people to look back 5 years, and if you've been trying to pay off your debts, have you made any progress over the last 5 years? And sometimes it just simply is that there's just too much debt. based upon your income, and that there isn't enough disposable income to get the debts caught up, and then bankruptcy makes more sense then. But it's a situation where if you've been trying to do your best and you're just not making any progress, regardless of the amount of debt that you owe, a Chapter 7 bankruptcy in particular can get rid of those debts. And that's why I say when people come in and say, do I have enough debt? I share experiences that I've had with clients where I've had clients literally come in with, $7,000 or $8,000 in debt, and it might as well have been $7 or $8 million in debt because they're, based upon their income and their life circumstance, there was zero opportunity for them to actually repay those debts, and so a bankruptcy made sense. I've also seen it on the flip side where a client could come in with $50,000 or $60,000 in credit card debt, and based upon their income and their potential for income in the future, there is a good chance they could pay those debts off if they really buckled down and implemented some of these systems that are out there to get the debts paid off. So those are a couple just pointers is, if you're thinking about your debt situation, particularly as we're coming into the new year, if you're like, I don't know if I should file for bankruptcy or should I just try to, settle with my creditors? Should I try to, just try to make payments and try to get these things taken care of? I know it's a tough decision, but hopefully those two things will give you a little bit of insight about some of the things that someone like myself, a bankruptcy attorney, thinks about when people come into my office and helping them determine if bankruptcy is a good option. Because people are surprised to learn sometimes that I don't think bankruptcy is always the best option. There are other things you can do that aren't going to have as long of lasting consequences as a bankruptcy will. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Again, appreciate you taking the time to listen in today. If you would be so kind, as we're launching this new podcast, if you're listening to this through iTunes, I appreciate you going there to leave some feedback. I'll leave a link in the show notes where you can leave a review for the podcast. And as I've been talking about, in the near future, I'm going to have it set up on the website so you can actually go there and leave a voicemail, and I can respond to questions that people have directly through the podcast. Again, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks for watching.